let John take.
Roundabout. Let me see if I can.
All right, we are rock and rolling. Okay. Call the public meeting here on EMS workshop, Monday, February 5th, 2024. We have the Rockport Select Board members here, and I'll have John Duke in a minute sort of introduce the other folks who are on the agenda to talk. This is a workshop format, so it's not a, we won't be receiving any public comment. We want to hear from the people on the agenda. This is an important matter for the Select Board to consider, and we need to make sure we have the time to listen to the folks on the agenda and get the information we need to hear. If anyone does have information they would like to share with us, we'd encourage them to submit either email or letter form to the town office, to John Duke and the Select Board members, and we're happy to consider that information, but tonight we will not be taking public comment. So, John.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate everyone's patience through this. We obviously would hope to have this meeting a few weeks ago, but unfortunately the storm did not exactly. I'm talking, so okay. Just making sure you. It's not just when Jeff looks at me, I pay attention to these things. So, and so I appreciate everyone's patience and ability to sort of reconfigure schedules to be here, because certainly, that's. We would like to have had this conversation 3 weeks ago, but, these things happen and away we go. So I wanted to maybe just set a little bit of a brief tone at the outset of why we're here. And I know that Chief Peasley and some of the guests that he's talked with have different pieces to plug into this conversation, but since it's been a few minutes since we talked about EMS last, I just want to set the stage and also allow for those who are maybe tuning into this conversation for the first time to be able to understand exactly what it is that we're trying to discuss tonight. So the town of Rockport has been engaged through a series of contracts over the last decade or so with Northeast Mobile Health Services. That contract was initially signed after an RFP process was pursued by the 4 towns that previously were participants in Canada First Aid Association. That was a local nonprofit that existed for 70 years, and the 4 communities that were part of that were met with a crisis point that Canada First Aid, and there was very little time for the 4 communities to really wrap their heads around the real costs of EMS services. And the 4 towns took the solution and collaboratively, though each individual town signs their agreements with their EMS provider, collaboratively chose through sort of a process that was cobbled together to work with Northeast Mobile Health Services. Rick Petrie, who's sitting right behind me over here, is one of the folks who helped our 4 towns put that conversation together, understand the world that we're walking into and had very little knowledge of. The relationship that the towns had with Canada First Aid was very much in the same spirit as the relationship we have with our volunteer firefighters. It was homespun. It was the people that lived around the corner who'd show up if you fell ill, and that was something that would be a change. But we were heartened, those of us who were involved. I was in Hope at that time, that so many people were going to be moving from Canada First Aid and moving over to work for Northeast. And I think that process moved forward. The initial contract price for all 4 towns was around $30,000. It was a veritable bargain, and we also knew that the model that was being presented was one that was the costs that we were incurring for Northeast were largely being offset by transfer revenues that they were receiving from the hospital. And so it made sense logically, financially. We could understand why it wouldn't cost us the same amount as it would to keep Canada First Aid in business, which was well over $400 You know the exact number, Kim, but well over $400,000.
407.
There we go. So we went through this process. We established a EMS review committee. The committee looked at data for whether or not they were meeting standards of the contracts and so forth. 10 years, or just short of probably 7 years, progress, and the two towns, Camden and Rockport, take the lead on a study in collaboration with the hospital, and Northeast Works as well as part of that, to study EMS services in our community, in our region, and how can we better improve that. And there were a number of findings from that study, one of which was for each community to engage in first responder programs. Town of Camden has begun that process. Town of Rockport is a little bit further behind in that process, but Chief Beasley will note, and I don't want to be the one to break it, but since I'm talking now, we have received our license for first responders. So that's due in large part to the work that's coming, and you'll hear more about in the next few minutes. So that gets us to this point. I would say around a year ago, the towns, a little less than a year ago, I should say, towns were informed, the town managers and administrators were informed that Northeast Mobile Health would probably come back to us this year with a higher cost to operate. There's a 3-year contract that the towns had signed, and likely that cost would increase significantly for FY25, and which will be the last year of the 3-year agreement. So that obviously causes all the towns to sit up in their chair and say, well, what do we need to do? And in the same fashion that in 2013-14, those towns felt in part blindsided, or it came out, from out of the dark. I think there's a real desire and need from where I sit, having gone through that once, to not be in that situation again, and not have a town that I manage be in that situation again, and try to get ahead of any potential issues. So since that point in time, and since I'd say that summer, we've been working, talking, researching, educating, and trying to find solutions to go from a point where our town had only one full-time firefighter, our chief, to now to consider what are the options moving forward. The board, as you all know, or as many of you know, our board approved the hiring of 2 EMT/firefighters as part of the current year budget. Both firefighters were hired, one in August, one in November, and both are on staff now. They allow us for station coverage from the busy points of the day out of the station over on Main Street. But having said that, two firefighters did not allow us to really look at options. And as we talked last fall, or I should say last spring, through the budget process, for the town of Rockport to seriously consider solutions that are beyond and offering EMS services or collaborating on EMS services, we would have to take a very significant upgrade in our expenditures, not only in terms of the equipment we'd have to buy, but also the personnel we would have to employ to do it. So this tonight's about talking about what that model looks like. The board, as you all voted in December, approved the purchase of an ambulance pending voter approval of your budget, and that will so that's teed up. That's one major piece of the puzzle. We've certainly talked about the funding for that, and we can talk about the budget certainly more. But that's obviously a big piece. But the structure of the department, how it works, the policies, the procedures, the process of moving from a contract-based for-profit entity working for the town in a contract basis to provide EMS services is a very different dynamic than what is being, what's being discussed and what's in that budget, that draft budget that we shared before the meeting. So why we're here is certainly it's been a long road. I don't think that the towns were ready to have this conversation a decade ago. They are now. And we have saved greatly in terms of tax commitments over the last decade in amounts we're not paying to provide these services. Is all of that money well saved? Some say yes, some say no. I think that there are those who would argue that the services that have been provided are to contract. There are some who would say that the services have been provided are below the standards of what Rockport residents might expect. So that's partly one of the many questions that I think the board and the community has to ask ourselves is, what do we want? Do we want a contract basis where one ambulance, could be among many different communities or two or other needs for that one ambulance? Or do we want a service that's based in Rockport for Rockport primarily, but with needs to work with others? And I think my hope for tonight would be that the information that the five of you get from these folks and on teams can help you to understand what that model looks like, whether or not that's a model you could support in a budget, and then from there, giving the flexibility and the freedom and the I think not a mandate of sorts, but directive to staff to go out and solve those pieces of the puzzle that are still challenging. And I will say firsthand, it's largely about our relationships with our neighbors. While I think that there are a number of communities who we've been talking to and are working with, I think it's very difficult to go to a community like Hope and say, well, this is what we can offer you, when I don't know what we can offer you until the five of you say, we think this is a good idea, we think this is a terrible idea. So those sort of directions allow us to maybe answer some of these questions that we still have, and hopefully, by the time we get to the budget process here in a month, it's gonna be very clear, and we can answer those questions. And that's why we're sort of front loading this part of the budget process, is really to try to get those answers for you ahead of time, and not allow this one issue, this huge issue that is such an impact on the budget, but also it speaks a lot to what our community wants and needs, and talk about that as a separate issue. So I think that's, from my perspective, what I see. I know Chief has some thoughts, but that sort of sets the table for me. So
Thanks, John. I think that it sort of lays it out for us here tonight. And Chief Peasley, I guess I'd turn to you you've got some information and present.
Sure. I was asked to speak about the why, but I do want to first and foremost thank everybody for being a part of this. The support in the last 5 months has been huge. A lot of people reached out in favor of this. We wouldn't be where we are today without the support that I've gotten from the people. Joe Moore, full-time paramedic in Rockland, as well as a resident of Rockport, has been basically the right hand to this. He's put together our entire policies, our procedures, our agreements with Penn Bay. He found Dr. McAllister as our medical director, worked with everything with the pharmacy to get us to where we are, ordered their supplies, as well as Chief Wytalk, who has been a huge part of this with helping Chief Richards in Belfast, EMS Chief Booker in Waldoboro, and Dr. McAllister as well, who not just as a medical director, but he's been here for our inspection with the state. He's met with me. He's been proactive about it. Excuse me. It's these people that have got us to where we are. I can't do this by myself. The experience amongst these guys is 20 to 30 years of EMS experience, leading departments. So that's why we are where we are right now. Typically, Maine EMS, we worked with them, is about a 3-month process to obtain our license. We didn't hurry, we didn't go fast, we didn't push it. We did what we had with our material, and we obtained our license in less than a month and a half. So kudos to all of them for helping and stepping up. I thank them. The big question is the why. I've been bringing this up for years. As a fire chief and as just a regular person in the street, and as a taxpayer of Lincolnville as well, the concern that I've had, as well as many people, with the service that we're receiving. Northeast is still here. They were one of the largest for-profit companies in the state when they started. They had a large crew, a big presence in our area 10 years ago. But to today, that has significantly changed. Yes, they're here. They can speak to that in writing later, but the service that we're getting, our bill has doubled. It increased by almost $453,000 a year early in the contract. We're paying a substantial amount more for no improved service. We're not getting any more rigs, we're not getting any more staffing, nothing has changed. I feel as the fire chief here, that the service has definitely gone downhill in the 10 years that they've been here. We've expressed complaints, we've expressed concerns. The communication has still not been there as we've asked for years. Not only our department, but other surrounding departments have asked for better communication. It's not been there. Small things such as I Am Responding that I brought up, that is a countywide service that every full-time agency uses except for Northeast Ambulance. It's important because it shows your staffing level for that day, who's on, how many people are available, and that's still not being used. The big thing for us is we need to get the control. Right now, we do not have any control over what's happening. Yes, there's a contract, but in the times that we've made recommendations, we haven't seen those changes. We need control over the equipment, the personnel, their training, their attitudes, their professionalism. We need control over that, which we don't now. And we've had issues with this in the past, and again, we haven't seen the changes. I'm not pointing out any one person or anything individually, it's just a company as a whole is what we're referring to. It's time to make the change for this area to service our community and our citizens the way they deserve to be serviced. And that's 100% under our control. So for me, that's the biggest why. For us as a community, there's been concerns. Again, this is not just Jason saying this. This is a great deal of people that have expressed this. There's other communities that have said the exact same thing. It's something that I desperately hope that you guys will consider.
Can I ask you just,
Yes.
I don't want to distract from the EMS issues that are really the bulk of what we're talking about tonight, but my understanding has been also that we're trying to solve another problem, which is the sort of changing nature of volunteer fire departments over the course of time. So we're adding, we're sort of fixing two problems.
That's the next part, yep.
Okay.
No, I was asked to speak about the why first, so
Okay.
that is definitely,
And that's fine, I'll let you,
Yeah, no.
do it in your order.
no, that's definitely, it's very important. I've been bringing that up just as long as I have with EMS concerns. It's countrywide, I mean, it's national-wide, both fire, EMS, and police, we're seeing it on every aspect. But volunteer service as a whole is becoming pretty obsolete. Not just here, I mean, we're very fortunate. We still have 26 people on the roster, and we're still getting 17 people to show up. However, we're not getting applicants coming in the door. We've had one applicant, I think, in 2 years, similar, some departments have not even had that. The volunteer service has changed because of the requirements of training hours, the time that you need to commit. It's significantly increased. The fire department, when I grew up in Camden, my dad on the fire department's not a good old boy club anymore where all the dads would go there for breakfast, for coffee and lunch and so on and so forth. You just don't see that anymore. So having 24-hour staffing, not only from an EMS, but from a firefighter standpoint is huge. You're gonna have a firefighter, AMT in there, as well as a medic that can still respond to calls at night. They can take care of stuff at night that we're not, if we're not on duty, that they can handle in-house. We've also looked at a variety of different options within the town from code enforcement as well. Camden currently does the licensing for businesses. That's something that we're looking into doing as well, so that we can go out to the restaurants that service foods, do a one-time, once-a-year inspection of that facility to make sure it's up to standard before they get their license for that year, and then you would vote on that license. So that's another option we're looking at as well.
Great, thanks. And I do think the bulk of what we're talking about tonight is the EMS service. But
It is.
I think the taxpayers, residents, as we spend
Yep.
the kinds of money that are shown in this budget, I just want people to be aware that we're getting something else that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, again, in-house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, someone will be there We have a whole list of things that we're going to look to do. Camden First Aid, back in the day, was really good with a lot of this. Between the open door policy, they provided EMTs to all the local events, whether it's sporting, the Donut Festival. There was always somebody there without having to be asked. They were there. We are going to do, we've already looked into the timeframes, but we're going to do twice a year, we'll do free CPR, AED, stop the bleed classes for all Rockport residents at the fire station. So we'll do free classes, we'll do daily blood pressure checks if people can stop in during certain times, obviously pending if we're not on calls. So that will give options for people to stop in to have that stuff, done as well. So there's a lot of other options for that.
I know, Chief, I know you had talked with, I don't, if the board wants to start talking about the experiences, but I know Chief probably we're trying to, we gotta via Teams, and I don't know, Jason, if you wanna maybe just talk about your experiences talking with some of the other departments.
Yep.
If that works.
I briefly mentioned in the last meeting, in talking with Maine EMS and Melissa Adams, who's one of the head licensing, in just the last few years alone, I think it was 13 different towns have gone from a for-profit, similar to Northeast and Deltas and all those, to a municipality fire-based EMS. I spoke to 12 of the 13 fire chiefs or EMS chiefs, depending on that town. Most of them have gone through the process or are in the middle of the process of making that change. One of the biggest thing that it's out of their control, back to what I was saying, is that department. Response times have dropped, so that service is not responding in an adequate time. Again, we get the reports that Northeast makes in reference to those times, but response times have changed. Personnel has significantly dropped. The pricing is significantly increased with, again, less service or the same service or less in some of these cases out there. A lot of them have not had the good luck of transferring easily. As you can imagine, it's not an easy transition to go from one company to you taking over. It's been a struggle, as we expect the same issues here. I mean, there's going to be speed bumps with anything you take over. But in talking with all of these chiefs that have made the transition or almost complete, they're 100% satisfied with making that decision. Again, talking with Maine EMS, there is not a large number of for-profit companies left out there. The companies that are out there are not the size they used to be. They are, if not cut in half, if not greater, in their size. They're reducing, they're getting smaller, they're going out of business. For-profit services are going to become a thing of the past in the future. So being proactive, getting a game plan, getting staffing, getting everything ready for our community, to me, is the most important thing with this.
Question is there a distinction between EMS services and ambulances transporting people? I mean, because I've heard, I understand that it's two different sides of the business for ambulances. That some of the for-profit companies.
That's where they make their money. I mean, as anybody will tell you, that's where your money's made, is on the transfer business, not on your 911. The billing for 911, obviously, it's does that person have insurance and things? But transporting usually comes through through the hospital services, and that's another thing that we can guarantee as well is. Our ambulance is going to be either on a call in Rockport or guaranteed available, not doing transfers. So we're not going to be on transfers. We're going to be here for the community at all times.
I think that's a very important distinction for anybody listening in.
Yes, we are not doing the transfer business. We will be here in town ready to go.
So private services that are there,
yes,
provide that service to the hospital and all that.
Correct.
On their own.
I believe North Star has the contract for Penn Bay at this time. I've been speaking with Mike Senecal, who I believe is one of the regional managers. They are also agreeing to sign a mutual aid agreement with us for mutual aid coverage to back us up, as well as Rockland Fire and EMS. So we have a mutual aid agreement with Rockland, as well as North Star. So we already have two mutual aid agreements for coverage with those organizations. Then again, when Camden, gets on board with their ambulance, hopefully we'd be working with them as well.
a good time.
I was just, and I know you do have people
Yeah.
on board.
Did you want to?
Some
Yeah.
of the towns.
So unfortunately, Chief, I'll get right with you. Unfortunately, two other chiefs weren't able to make it, as I said, with this service. One of them's at a confirmed structure fire right now, and the other one had a last-minute appointment he had to change. So Chief Wytalk will be writing a letter to the board with his support. Oh, you don't want me to turn it up yet, then. With his support and the mutual aid agreement and everything from the city of Rockland. So he will get that to you hopefully real soon.
And my understanding, just briefly, is that Rockland is very supportive and believes it's time
Absolutely,
for
yes.
the other communities to sort of step up.
And they've been doing the municipality-based fire EMS for years and years and years. We have the fire chief from Ellsworth on, who is halfway through the process, I believe is the way I understand it, with another private organization. Their contract with that organization ends in June, which at that time, I believe the chief can clarify if they're gonna be taking over full-time as well. But I'll let the chief just give a quick statement on what they're doing, if you don't mind, chief.
Great.
Sure, good evening.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Chief Beasley. As he said, my name is Chief Gillerow from the city of Ellsworth. You are correct. Our current contract with a private service is due to expire at the end of June. Currently, we're weighing some options as to whether we're going to extend that for an additional year, just primarily because of our staffing. So we're looking to do that, but we have started this process. It's been a long process for us. We started this back pre-COVID in the fall of 2019, where we went from being strictly a fire suppression agency to doing first response, and became a licensed first response service. Between 2019 and the spring of 23, we remained that way. In the spring of 23, I was tasked with starting an EMS service, but what they were looking for currently, because we were under contract with a private service, was for us to become what we called, and this is how we worded it with Melissa Adams in the state, as a supplemental service. We basically became a mutual aid agency within our own city without taking over primary EMS services. So primary EMS service is still a responsibility of the third-party service, and then if they're not available, we will provide the transport. We still respond to every 911 call in the city of Ellsworth. So we're still working hand in hand with them. However, if they're not available, then we take on the transport role. If they send us a BLS ambulance and we're at a higher license level, we retain patient care and we provide the transport, just following our state protocols to ensure that the highest quality care remains in place. So as far as the future moving forward, it is the intent of the city council for the city of Ellsworth to pursue full-time EMS coverage along with transport. The timeline is kind of vague right now. We're looking at potentially 2 to 3 years before we can assume full 911 coverage and not rely on a third-party service. And that's predominantly due to having to bring on additional staffing. For us, it would require us to bring on an additional 8 people for us to be able to manage 2 full-time ambulances.
Do you have one ambulance or 2 ambulances now?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
Do you have one ambulance now?
Currently, we do have 1 ambulance in the fire station 24/7.
Okay. And in terms of deciding whether or not to bring on additional staff, is it a budgetary issue for the city of Ellsworth?
Yeah, so the staffing, the cost is obviously very prohibitive for us for adding additional staffing. The council, they, I don't know if I'm getting feedback or if you're getting feedback.
It's on our end, I think.
Yeah, I think we're
Um,
probably distracted.
right now, it's cost prohibitive in the city for us to add additional staffing. And I'm sure Chief is familiar, I'm actually pursuing, a FEMA Safer Grant to help us with adding staffing. And if awarded, that would help us over a period of 3 years.
I think that's helpful to hear, and it's interesting to, sort of hear about the step process of moving towards that, taking the time to do that. Have you seen some downsides to this approach? What's your sense of this?
Communication. We're seeing increases in communication and we're seeing decreases in communication. So we're having some peaks and valleys dealing with this with our contracted service. From our standpoint, we were already running every single call. So for us, it wasn't necessarily a change except for the fact that we're now capable of transporting if we're needed to do transports.
In terms of the billing, then if you do the transport, do you bill out and the private company bills when they do the transport?
Service is allowed to bill a patient.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of that.
You're correct. If we do the transport, we bill. If the contract provider does the transport, they bill. But only one service is allowed to bill a patient.
Yep. Any other questions or for Chief Guillermo?
I don't know enough to ask yet.
If we have more questions, Chief, I assume I could get something off to you, and you'd be willing to maybe email back, I could share with the board?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Perfect.
And I apologize. In talking with Chief Peasley earlier, I can share how we did our response plan to show how we did the shared agreement with them.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
So now that we've.
Chief,
Sorry.
I know that
Yeah.
the Winslow Fire Chief couldn't be here, but what is the status of the Winslow service?
They are fully, they have left, both Waterville and Winslow had left their private company about a year or so ago.
Okay,
And both their agencies are full-time fire EMS.
okay. And do you have a sense of what they might be reporting in terms of how that has gone and any bumps in
I
the
mean,
road, any?
Obviously, staffing levels, as it is with everything. Staffing is obviously, the budget was the biggest concern at first, and, obviously that subsided, he said. But their response times have significantly increased. Patient care, from a professionalism standpoint, again, they didn't have control of it. They said it's significantly increased. But,
I want to clarify, you said response times have increased,
right.
is that improved?
Improved, yes.
Improved.
Sorry. Thank you, good call. Good catch, yes. So they have improved.
Okay.
Delays, yes.
Yes, yeah.
So I wanted to just echo Chief Peasley's concerns about the quality of what we're getting in our contract. I listened to the scanner, and we're supposed to have 3 rigs available during the daytime hours. New Year's Eve day. There were 2 calls that came in overlapping. I think 81 responded to the call, was en route to Penn Bay. When the other call came in, no other rigs responded. I can't remember exactly if the rig said we're gonna respond from Penn Bay before they even got there or immediately after. The timing of that is what I would call, a dump and run. you dump the patient and you run to the other call, rather than call mutual aid or bring in the 2 other rigs that you're supposed to have that day. I don't remember the cause, what the nature of the calls were, if they were critical, but if you had a critical call, you call mutual aid. You don't do that. And I question, we're gonna get caught one of these days with a call like that. Someone is not gonna get transported in the time they need to get transported. And if we have the control of our own service, we get on a call, we're not gonna hesitate to call mutual aid. We're gonna call. You know, and I've heard other calls like that, and I'm just like, where are all these ambulances? And I know at one of our previous meetings, whether it was 2 months ago, what have you, when we were first talking about, you know, the upcoming EMS contract, and we were told, you know, hey, it's an a la carte menu. Okay, but we were told, I'm on the EMS review committee. In the July meeting, we were told what the staffing was, you know, 3 during the day, 3 rigs during the day, 2 rigs the night hours, and then the wee hours, just 1 rig. New Year's Eve day, middle of the day, 1 rig. I don't know where the other 2 were. So if you're not providing what we're supposed to be getting now, I question the a la carte menu. I just think we're gonna get in a world of hurt if we don't have the coverage and know what we have for staffing and people. And another day, kudos to Rockport Fire. I happened to stop in to see Chief, talking to him. Call came in, fire Limerock Street, Rockland. Chief and the 2 firefighters were out the door within seconds. The call wasn't even finished, coming over the radio. They were on their way to assist at that call. I mean, that level of response, having our own crew, is amazing. Not waiting for those volunteers to come in from all parts of town to hop in a truck and head to Rockland for mutual aid. So, I mean, that right there, that could mean a matter of saving a house, a life. So, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know we'll talk a little bit more with both Dr. McAllister and Mr. Moore. But I think as we look through the budget documents here, which are very thorough and prepared, and we'll talk more in detail about those, but it points out that the average increase in taxes to our residents would be $276. And if that's saving a house, a life, I think our residents would expect that. So, thank you, Kim. Anybody else on the board want to comment at this point, or should we? Chief?
I'm just trying to think, I heard that there are the 13 other towns that have done it, and I just want to make sure we're grasping positively each and every situation. Is that, I mean, they are all happy with what they're doing.
I have not heard, other than staffing, every one of them has the staffing, but from a response from the community, it's absolutely been an improvement, yes.
And when you say staffing, does that just mean the concerns
Finding
with
your
finding
staffing.
the staff?
Again, fire, police, EMS, countrywide, Maine, Knox County,
Yep. Challenge.
but
Okay.
Sue, if I could throw in on that comment, from 2018 to 2023, I was the full-time fire chief in the town of Durham. Durham, a very similar sized community, actually smaller than Rockport, only about 4,000 full-time residents. They'd been through a similar circumstance where they had a first responder service. They contracted with multiple other services, Northeast included, over that time frame. And they found, once again, that their citizens came to expect things that a service that isn't based in that community, isn't focused on that community, isn't going to provide for them. They will be concerned about their own community, they'll be concerned about covering their bottom line, and things will get sacrificed. And they were very happy with choosing to go with their own transporting service at that point, and that was 2015, I believe, that they took over at that point. So it has been the trend over time. services looking to save money contracting with larger outside agencies that ultimately in the end couldn't provide the service and the care and the coverage that they wanted. It's not a new trend, we're just seeing it finally progress to this area.
Because I'm trying to think from the perspective, again, of people that might be watching and really wondering, why is the town of Rockport thinking of doing this? We've got the sewer department and all these other big things that we're talking about. And so, I think it's helpful as many case studies, so to speak, as we can hear about, to educate us and to educate the public of the current real situation, how the changes have happened over years in these types of services, and what's available to us to do, you know. Because I think this is the perfect forum for this, and I know if the others had been available, we'd be hearing a couple more. So I'm encouraging, if anybody has any real-life anecdotes or whatever, that would help anybody to understand why we're really seriously considering doing this.
And I think it helps to hear that there's sort of a trend in this
Yes.
direction, that the world of for-profit ambulance services has really changed. And I know our state legislature last session was really working on what they could do for all these communities who were at risk of losing their ambulance services, because that business model has just been very difficult. So I agree with you in terms of the individual town anecdotes, and then also to appreciate that this is, we're not alone. You know, we at least are hearing about 13 communities that have had to make this choice. We're aware locally that other communities closer to us are also examining this.
Because I know, I had one person reach out to me and was pleased that we were having a workshop and some stuff was going, but he specifically was like, well, what about Camden? You know, are they gonna be coordinating with you? And I think right now that's kind of an unknown. I mean, that's the expectation.
Right.
But they are not moving as quickly as we thought they might be moving. If that's,
Well, yeah, it's a good question, Michael, because I think that every town does things their own way, right? You know, when I first came to the board to talk about this, it might have been the October meeting or November meeting, they had a meeting, their select board had met and pretty seriously talked about taking steps pretty aggressively, I felt. And that was the wake-up call in the aftermath of what we saw with the Knox County Communications Center. When we saw that come apart, the last thing I wanted to do was to be here in a meeting and say, whoops, we're behind the situation. So, you know, that's where, you know, Chief and I met and talked about, we need to get something so that the five of you are in a good position to make a decision for Rockport. So my feeling is that this process, sort of front-loading this ahead of a budget, ahead of, you know, moving into November and December, really talking about issues, allows you the time and the bandwidth to focus on what we're talking about here. If we were doing this as part of our regular budget process, I don't think it would get the time or the attention that you all would want to be able to give it. Because it's a very important topic. It's not just a line item. It's about the health and welfare of our residents. And we have a provider now, and what do we do with that provider? And you can't simply vote on June 11th, let's say, and all of a sudden, poof, you've got a provider there to show up July 1. It doesn't work like that, right? So we have to take these steps, be deliberate about it. And there's going to be a bit of, well, we're ahead. And when we met, when the managers met with John and Rick and Butch at the Northeast base in Rockport to talk about their proposed number for FY25, you know, the comment that sort of turned around and came to me and to Audra, because the board, we talked about it, the Cannabis Board had talked about it. So, well, it would be nice to know what you're going to do. And I don't disagree with them, but I think the issue is for Rockport to make this decision, we've got to make a good decision, right? We've got to be thoughtful about it. There's things that we shared in earlier meetings about prospective costs that once we dug in deeper, didn't bear out the way we wanted them to. So, we're getting closer and closer to where I think we feel like that's the number, that's the budget. This is pretty exhaustive in what we've done thus far. But if we had gone off of what we'd given you before, it would have been good enough to me for you. So my sense is the five of you need to feel good about where you are. And then I'm glad to go to get on the road show and go with Chief and talk with Clarence Keller, the fire chief, and Hope and Samantha, and talk to all these different people who are involved. Say, this is what we're doing. Do with it what you will. Camden obviously is a big piece of this, right? This is how they go through this process. We'd met with them prior to your December meeting. Felt like we were in a good place. They had a meeting shortly after we met with them. It was maybe a different message than what we were sort of hearing, but that's fine. I think whatever path the town of Camden wants to take is fine. But the town of Rockport has to choose its way and look and say, okay, what are you doing over there on that side of the fence? Are you mowing? Are you weed whacking? We need to know what each other are doing as neighbors and stay in communication. But when Chief Peasley and Chief Wytalk and Chief Farley met a few years ago, and they tried to look at what would a structure look like if there were three communities part of one system, the costs dwarf what I'm sharing with you. Because we had to go from one full-time employee to 12. Not 8, like we're proposing, 12. And that was for us to be part of a 3-town agreement. So for us, this is us trying to say, the middle of that road of trying to say, this is allowing us to operate, stand on our own 2 feet, work with our neighbors, both in Rockland and with Camden, and Hope, and Lincolnville, and Appleton, and whoever else needs us. But predominantly saying Rockport is our home and that's where our support is. That's really that's sort of the mindset going into a lot of this. But you can't ignore what's happening on the other side of that fence, right?
Just because I think everybody is very comfortable and familiar with the fact that Rockport, Camden, and a couple of the other outlying towns have such wonderful cooperation in so many different things. And I don't want anybody thinking that if Rockport decides to go ahead and do this, that we're cutting ties and we're going on our own. I want to make sure that that's understood, that that's not what we're talking about possibly doing.
The only way, I've said this in every single meeting, I'll say it again, if people have questions, come to the fire station. Don't listen to hearsay, don't listen to what other people say, come ask us directly. But the way for this to work is to work with Camden. We may not be on the same path to get there. We may not be on the same timeline. One of us may get there before the other. But eventually we will be working together in the long run. It's just, someone's got to start it. And I mean, there's no way for us to do it exactly. I mean, you can see how things are going with other things, but there's no way for us to go exactly the same as start. I mean, it's just almost impossible.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So their feelings, I believe, are somewhat the same as ours, as well as other areas. So,
is it things are coming to mind more? Is the as soon as I said that, having an understanding of the current situation, and I don't know if I'm treading on proprietary information or anything, or confidential stuff, but we've been talking a little bit tonight of Northeast and their services not coming up to the standards that traditionally would hope for, or whatever, or the discrepancy in what's perceived and what's possibly done. Can you, in a nutshell, give specifics to people hearing, like, of what has changed over the last few years? Like, it's been mentioned that the size of their services have come down around the state. If I know, those kind of things I think would be helpful for people to get a grasp of if this is the appropriate time to.
And I think Kim gave a few examples.
Yeah.
Of
But
not,
I'm thinking like, how many towns are they not in that they were before?
Well,
What's the size of the company
No,
now
it's-
for us?
yeah, I haven't done an exhaustive study of where Northeast is now as opposed to say 2021 or 20. I can tell you firsthand that that it's a different company than the one we talked with in 2014. And there are good parts of that and there are bad parts of that. And I think that we have undoubtedly, and I think all parties would agree that we've reduced our staffing by contract, which is a mutual agreement, which is agreement between the town and the contractor to do that. In throughout the contract period, because the feeling was is that the use of those rigs is not what we needed. We were largely, our initial contract was based upon the service that Canada First Aid was providing, and we tried to use that as the model. And that was what we put out in the RFP in 2014. And they met that, and then slowly we obviously discussed that. There was a feeling mutually, town and contractor, that amount could be reduced. Remember though, that conversation is a four-town conversation.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
what Rockport may want, and obviously who's involved in those conversations at those times, has changed. There has been a merry-go-round of different people who've been in these jobs. We've had 3 managers since the first contract, actually 4, since Rockport in 10 years. So there's a lot of different pieces, a lot of different people who are looking at different aspects of that. I think there is a patient confidentiality that we have to be mindful of as well. So, for example, one of the difficult parts of the EMS review committee, so this 4-person group that we've created, is that we have a public body that wants to come and discuss issues it has with the EMS service. Well, there's a lot of reasons why we can't be all that open in a public meeting. Why, Joe Smith had bad care, and why wasn't this dealt with, and why was his, so there's difficulty on both sides of why that sometimes that doesn't meet up. So that's a little bit of a both sides of the situation, but it's true. We can't talk about it in public because we can't put our residents in a bad way, and nor can they. I think the other part of it, though, in terms of what's wrong with the service, or what are the issues, I think listening to the scanner, I think, what Chief's experiences are. What I'm hearing from those folks are, that's not the quality care we should want in Rockport.
Like red flags for
That's a red flag.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's per contract, but that doesn't necessarily mean what Rockport should want moving forward is that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
For whatever
there's a
reason
distinction.
this is reality. Yeah.
Right, and I think, and Joe talked about it a second ago, it's really about, there's a distinction, I think, Chief, tell me if I'm, sorry, hit the mic, Jeff. I think that there's a sense from the side is that the care that our volunteer firefighters provide our town, that sort of blood, sweat, and tears that they provide, that it doesn't even matter if they're punched in, punched out, punched wherever, they're gonna show up. That call that Kim was talking about. That's difficult to ask anyone who's simply doing a job. I'd put my own self in that shoe. I'm working for you all, but there's a part of me that's feeling like this is part of what I do. This is my vocation in life, is to work for the town. That's not necessarily the same if you're a per diem and you live in Gardner and you're coming down for the day to pick up a shift. That's a different relationship. Doesn't mean they care any less. I care as much about Newcastle as half the people live in Newcastle still, and I haven't worked there for 3 years. But it's different. And I think that's part of the distinction, perhaps, that I think from Jason and from others who are local to that. And Canada First Aid had that flavor. that flavor of homespun, whether you know, when you're from here, you give back to your community.
We're all in it together.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, from Chief's perspective, he feels that we can do that to a greater degree. Am I missing anything, or?
No, I,
Yeah.
And I wonder if, my understanding is Dr. McAllister might have some comments
Yeah.
on, in this subject matter.
Sure.
Might help.
Certainly can. One thing I want to be crystal clear about is I sort of wear a couple of hats in the community in terms of talking about my emerging role as medical director for this EMS service, but also working full-time in the Penn Bay Emergency Department. So just to be crystal clear from the start, my discussion here is my own personal opinion. I'm not here to represent Penn Bay Medical Center or Maine Health or any of those larger organizations. You know, I can speak in some generalities, but really I'm more interested in if there's specific sorts of questions that I can answer or address. I didn't prepare any particular statement. I sort of came more sort of open-minded, open-eared to try and contribute to this discussion wherever I could.
Okay. I mean, my understanding is you have some experience with Northeast Mobile Health Services and the hospitals, working with them, and what that experience.
I do. I've been asked to refer any particular questions about the relationship between my hospital and Northeast Services to the leadership at my hospital,
Okay.
who are happy to answer any of those questions.
Okay.
I can speak in sort of generalities on what I've seen in my experience. I started working at Penn Bay in 2015, and I believe when I got there at that time, Northeast is one of the services that helped us with inter-facility transfers, transferring patient from one hospital to another hospital. And I should say, I think for the purposes of this discussion, that's probably a little bit of a different service. It still uses ambulances, it uses the same paramedics and EMTs and drivers, but it's a different focus, I think a different importance than 911 response. But I can sort of say in generalities over the decade I've been at Penn Bay, in the past, we really relied on a number of different services to help us move patients to other hospitals. That's Northeast. Some of the various town municipal services participated in that as well. And it was often we would reach out to the group and see who's ready to run a transfer for us. And over the last decade, I've seen, generally speaking, less and less availability for that. That when we put out the call, there are fewer agencies who say, we're ready to take a transfer right now, to the point where often we wait until we can find someone to transfer. Sometimes hours, sometimes days. And it's to the point where recently our hospital, our health system, sort of looking at our challenges, looking at the future, made the decision to partner with North Star EMS services and the hospital itself. And I wasn't directly involved in this creation, so this is my understanding looking in from the outside, but that our hospital system made the decision that we need to purchase our own ambulances, hire and pay our own staff as our own employees, maintain our own quality improvement and local control over our transfer service to make sure that we have that availability that meets the standard that we're looking for.
So in some ways, some similarity to the kinds of issues we're looking at and trying to figure out what the best resolution for our
I think
community
so.
is.
And EMS, to my experience, is a struggle statewide. This isn't anything unique to Rockport, Knox County, state of Maine. It's not unique even in New England. Nationwide, folks are struggling with this. But we've certainly seen that increasing challenge over the last decade and really decided we need to do this ourselves to make sure we meet our specific needs.
So is North Star, that's the name, you guys started that, huh?
So
Or acquired it?
So my understanding, and there's actually folks in this room that could probably speak to it in more detail than I can, that North Star is a pre-existing EMS service more in the central western part of the state that for years has had some affiliation with a Maine Health hospital. And as we were looking at how do we kind of create, build, expand our own services, being able to tap an EMS service that currently works within the auspices of Maine Health was a more natural progression to say, you guys are doing this over there, help us create our own over here.
Okay. Yeah, so it's Maine Health, offshoot or owned, or.
I
and
don't,
it
I
doesn't
guess I
really
would
even
say
matter that much.
affiliated and connected, but I don't necessarily know the business structure tree of how that ownership goes.
But for the Penn Bay Hospital, that's kind of the go-to default transport service.
And we're using them now, we're building that out for part of the Coastal Healthcare Alliance, the combination, the alliance between Penn Bay Medical Center and Waldo County up in Belfast. We're sort of building that together.
I've been transported before. I don't remember which company, but it was a while ago, yeah. And whichever company it was a few years ago, I was taken care of, yeah. But a lot of people, I never knew until very recently that there was a distinction between that kind of service and, 911,
Yep.
The transport.
I just assume, an ambulance is an ambulance.
Yes,
But-
and not all EMS agencies choose to do transfers. Many are just 911 response.
Rockland Fire and EMS has never been, well, for the last 15 years have not been in the transfer business.
And I'm assuming our plan is not to.
Correct.
The reason why a number of them do go into that business is that it had been a very lucrative area. And for the same reason that it made great sense 10 years ago, Northeast works in that area, that can offset, ask very little of our taxpayers, and we still maintain EMS service, win-win. But as I think you mentioned, Denise, the structure's changing, the models are changing, the world around us is changing. And that's part of what Norton Cameron originally got caught up in, but we're fighting, and I mentioned this when I met with Northeast, the model is difficult. There's a reason why we're seeing this shift. And whether everybody's wrong or everybody's right, everyone seems to be, there's a lot movement in that one direction, which is the direction we're talking about. And as I had said, when I met with these guys a month ago, or 6 weeks ago or so, it's a battle that they're fighting, and to stay relevant, to stay alive, to keep their business operating. But the world is fighting. They're pushing that boulder, and the hill's getting steeper. It wasn't quite as steep in 2014, and it is now. Now, what we're talking about with the budget and everything it's in this packet is a shift, right? We're shifting some of those responsibilities and those costs directly to the taxpayer. But we're also maintaining a level of control. And so that control comes with a cost, but is that cost worth, the certainty and the certainty that you understand where you're going? And I've, for, the moment I got here, even before I got here, there were calls, and largely probably what drove the initial conversation regarding the study of should we not move away from a for-profit service and move toward a municipally based service in some degree, in some fashion with our neighbors. And that's a conversation that's almost been going on for as long as we've had the contract with Northeast Mobile Health Services. And I think the issue that they're facing is that model is crunching. There's some hope from the perspective that the legislature is serious and they're looking at these issues. There's hope that reimbursements will improve. There's hope that they'll try to improve Medicare or Medicaid reimbursements. But it's, again, the hill is high, and they'll acknowledge it. We'll acknowledge it. Everybody in this room will acknowledge it. The place that I think the five of you are and I am is knowing that. How far do we go down the road not knowing what the future looks like? Part of what drives the number that we were able to gather from Northeast is that there's some other contracts that are being used to help to support the number that that's being proposed to us. That causes some concern because obviously that means there's other issues that now impact how we operate. With us, it's very simple. We have an issue, and we have to deal with it when it's internal. When you're working with a private provider, there's a whole bunch of issues. And sadly, there's a lot of talk and gossip sometimes that goes through this world, which is unfair, but it happens. And I think that, having said that though, the realities of running a business in the medical world in 2024 is not for the faint of heart. You really need that heart monitor if you're gonna do it, I think. So, the ability to look beyond what's right in front of our face and say, where are we going long-term, and not have contracts. That's one part of this that doesn't get talked about. We talked about the money and what the service is, but the idea that a contract is the basis behind a core service of what you provide your residents gives me some concern. And I think, and the health of a private contractor, it provides a level of conversation that doesn't always occur. We aren't concerned whether or not we'll get the roads plowed, because I can name to you who they are, what route they're on. And Robert does a great job in our neighborhood, but we can't do that when we have a private contractor. It's a different conversation, and that creates a level of unease from boards, selectmen. There's a certainty in a budget number, but there's other types of control other than just telling the employee, hey, we gotta wash the rig again, or we gotta stock up. There's also the control of institutional control of knowing what we have.
I guess go ahead, Michael.
Because I actually wrote two questions there. I know we spoke earlier that the idea of us approving the ambulance purchase is contingent on the voters approving it in June. I just want to clarify, not just the ambulance, is the whole EMS program we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
because we
wanna make
can't
sure
do it without
people
voter approval.
Also understand that, it's
Right.
the whole
It's,
game.
well, voter approval goes to plowing the roads and
Yeah.
the lights and, it's
Yeah.
everything,
I
but
don't
yeah.
want people worrying, or thinking, what, is the select board just gonna be going,
Yeah, no,
We can't
everyone's,
spend their money without their approval.
absolutely.
Reiterate that. The other question that came up, it's like, Ellsworth said they're doing something, a collaboration with the private service one too, if I understood right. In all fairness, is that something that we should look as a potential option too?
Do you wanna, I don't know if we wanna talk about the budget, but do you maybe wanna talk about the
So basically, what he was indicating is something similar that we would look into with Northeast if they would work with us is, for a set time frame, whatever that decision would be made by the board, 6 months, whatever, we would work with them and respond to all calls. In their contract with their private company, I believe theirs is a 12-minute response time. So if Ellsworth arrives on scene at an ambulance call and their private provider's not there within 12 minutes, then Ellsworth takes the call and they move on. So they work in collaboration. However, there is very set guidelines or contract that they have to respond within a certain time. To his point, if it's a high-level call and they only send a basic, then Ellsworth would take the call if it's a paramedic and so on. So yes, that is something we would attempt to definitely work with Northeast on for a time frame until staffing levels get to where they are, where they need to be, as well as our employees are up to our standards and training.
Is there a financial benefit? I mean, hypothetically speaking, if a mutually cooperative agreement were to be done for multiple years, is there potential of a cost savings, or?
No, you would lose a lot of money.
Okay, that's what
It would be,
that's important.
because you'd be paying them as well as your people,
Yeah,
so you're doubling it.
okay.
The purpose of them working with them is to get their budget set, That's what he was indicating, is they're working with them to get their budget set and to get staffing. Once they get their staffing and their budget, that other service will be done.
That's a good clarification.
And if we're not transporting, we're not getting revenue for it.
Correct.
I wonder, before we get into the details of the budget and those, we're basically creating a new department and a new set of services that we've never done before. So it'd be great to sort of hear about how we're learning and why we think this is the right path to go forward.
Again, I've surrounded myself with the people that have done this for 20 to 30 years. Again, all the chiefs that I've mentioned, including Joe, have done this, again, as long as I've been a firefighter. They've done there, they've been that, so that's who we're leaning on. In the job descriptions is the layout, you would see that the EMS
Operations supervisor.
supervisor would oversee the EMS side of it. I would obviously oversee all of them, but that person would oversee the medical side of it and manage that. The 3 medics would work under him directly, or that person would work directly under them, as well as the firefighter EMTs. So everybody would fall kind of under that one person, and then obviously I would be the bigger picture of the whole thing. Yeah, it's up on the board, which you have it in your packet, I believe, correct? Okay.
Yep.
But it's a group effort. It's not one person. It's not somebody with minimal experience that just got licensed. I mean, we're using a group of people to help put this together and ensure that it's gonna work.
Great.
And these new people are not just sitting waiting for an EMS call.
That is correct.
I think that's important. for people to
No one's
understand.
sitting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's a whole laundry list of things that John and myself, as well as that EMS manager is gonna cover, from things within the community, things for the town, whether it's code. I mean, in your packet, you can see
Yeah,
all the
there's a
bullet
list.
points of things that they're gonna be doing. So no, they're not gonna be sitting, they're not gonna be playing laser tag or watching movies, you know. There will be things as, you know, if you go down to the city of Rockland, what time do you guys start your 7 to 4:30-ish is?
Yeah, that's the
I
standard
mean, that's their
time.
standard time, that they have a whole list of things that they're required to get done, and then obviously after that, there's other things that we're gonna be doing here. So there are set things on a daily basis that they do. Certain vehicles get checked each day, you know, the station gets cleaned every Saturday or Sundays, depending. Community outreach, I mean, there's a whole variety of things within this list of things that will be done, to include the code office, with, you know, fire inspections, things of that nature.
And that's something I hadn't even thought of, the code thing.
Camden does it as well, like for our ice cream stand. The fire department has to come and inspect it once a year. I mean, it's a quicker inspection, because obviously our building's very small, but that's what the fire department does. They come to make sure, you know,
Ice cream
that.
stand?
He
Yeah.
owns an ice cream stand on the side.
Oh.
Where?
River Ducks ice cream?
Oh,
the
that's
river.
you, oh, I didn't know
He's
that.
River Ducks, yeah.
Okay.
So, but the fire department comes once a year. They do it to all the restaurants that serve food. They do a full inspection, safety inspection, fire extinguishers, no power strips that are plugged into power. I mean, that's what they do, and that's something that we've discussed with Orion, that we're gonna
That'd be great.
present to you sooner than later, which is a great thing. It gets us into all these businesses. We've had a few instances just in the last couple months
Yeah.
of some businesses that there were some things that were very unsafe that we found. Unfortunately, we had to shut down certain sections, but we would never have gone in there if we didn't get a fire call there.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be really big for this community, is to have us going into those buildings and doing that once a year inspection. I believe it's $25 application fee. It's nothing huge, but I mean, it's a small revenue for the town. But again, and we can pre-plan as well with that business to go in and pre-plan, you know, events, fire, EMS, whatever.
And that's a good safety thing for the whole community.
Absolutely.
If you can avoid,
We're already doing that now with the school, and we do a lot with the hospital. We do every other year, we do a full 2-hour tour of the hospital. There's places in that hospital I never knew existed. But we do it every other year because it's such a massive building. So we do that with some of the larger places, but a lot of these restaurants, we don't do that. And that's part of this plan, would be to start that hopefully in July.
It'd probably be
Fall.
fall,
Fall.
once you're staffed up.
Once you're staffed up.
to be improving
Yep.
public safety.
Yeah, and Orion's working on the language for that, because obviously that means the ordinance has to be adjusted,
Yeah.
but it's,
That's a potential, though.
right, and we've talked about this for some time, about the concept of this, but this issue that we ran into a couple months ago, it's just sort of, we have lodging establishments, we have, we had a fire in one of our lodging establishments a couple years ago, which did not go well, and, this is, people, people put our trust in us to make sure they're safe. And I'll toot Jason's horn a little bit here. Jason does a lot of things that do not fall under his job description. People come in and ask him things that you would be like, they asked you what? But people in our town sometimes, and you know, understand from what you do, Michael, that sometimes people just need someone who can help them out. And I think that's what a lot of what this is. There's a woman who was calling Jason on Saturday, a couple months ago, about light bulbs, Now, he doesn't have to answer that call, but like the five of you and like everyone watching, if they felt like they had to call about light bulbs, sometimes Jason picks up that call and helps out. We've had Jason was a big part in trying to get, using some of our GA funds, and we helped someone out with a washer and dryer situation, helped to install that. Didn't have to do it, didn't take a whole bunch of his time, but that person, that resident didn't have the ability to do that on their own. And it wasn't, out of Jason's pocket, we have funds that are donated for the ability for us to do these things for people who are in a bad way. But that's the type of spirit that all of these 8 people working in this department are gonna have to have. And I think that's also the spirit generally that you saw at Camden First Aid and Camden Fire and Rockport Volunteer Fire and all these folks. That's what makes it special, right? That's the difference of why people appreciate what our firefighters do. And that's the spirit that we have to go into this with, is that's how we're gonna treat everybody. We can't be everyone's private caretaker, but, I mean, you understand what I'm saying, there's a level there.
Yes, absolutely.
Our police department does safety checks on buildings at night all the time. The number of checks that Tony does of different properties around town, he's like, hey, you gotta make sure you lock your window at night. I didn't even know he was checking my window at night in my office, but he did, So, these are the things that, people pay a lot to live here. And these are the things that people, they don't expect it, but when they know it's there for them, it makes it that much more special, and say, this is a community that cares for my well-being, not just takes my check and runs,
And these are things that go under the radar, sort of.
Totally.
They happen, it's a wonderful community
Right.
service, as it is, to help.
Right.
But they're usually not recognized,
No.
or known.
Well, it's why you wanna maintain that small town feel,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You don't wanna be these big cities. You wanna maintain that, and that's one way that we can, that have that personal touch. Not everyone can get in to see me, but they can see Jason or our advanced EMT firefighter who can go and check on their smoke detectors and help, with someone out who literally can't get on a step stool, those sort of things. We're not talking about people who have means or have able-bodied, who could be able to do it, but don't.
Yeah.
Don't talk to my wife about the smoke detector in my office. Anyway, I gotta replace that battery, I will. But those are the things that, we wanna go the extra mile for those folks. So,
Agreed.
Where do you wanna go next, Denise? Do you wanna walk
I'm
through the
wondering, do we
packet?
want to walk through information here? What do you guys think? Go through the information in the packet here that,
Yeah, without all the detail of the job description, so.
yeah,
I mean, the job descriptions are pretty clear cut. I mean, if you want, we can cover those anytime, but I mean, it's,
I don't think it's tonight's, that's.
yeah, and I think the point being that they're going to cover what you'd expect someone
Correct.
who's plus.
And more.
plus,
Plus, yeah.
I mean, you have your sheet here in front of you, you're gonna have the in-house firefighter medic in town at our station 24/7. Obviously, full commitment to the citizens of Rockport with no interruptions or delays from any type of transfers, improved accountability, response times, assisted with our mutual aid partners. And one of the big factors that I've said for a while is, 100% control over the service, response, equipment, training, and the personnel to ensure the highest level of customer service for the citizens of Rockport. And to me, I think that's absolutely huge.
And is our thought that, depending on how negotiations with Northeast go, I mean, we won't have an ambulance. I know we have the potential to have an ambulance on
Right.
site sooner rather than later,
Right.
but we're gonna be staffing up August 19th.
Yeah,
If you look at the
But
timeline,
when will we have
yeah.
something for someone to drive?
I mean, the timeline is obviously a timeline, it's rough.
Well, do you want to go to the time, well, we should probably stay on one page.
I know,
Poor
Jeff's
Jeff is wearing out his mouse over there. Do you want to run through the benefits and then do you want to run through the timeline?
Well, to cover most of the benefits,
I think we did, but I just want to make sure. Is there anything
obviously,
else you wanna-
revenue from billing and potential with other agreements with other communities. I already covered all the values that I had mentioned earlier on with life safety, pre-planning, EMS personnel at events, and all of that.
Yeah. This isn't an exhaustive list either. This is sort of this is a beginning, right? And
So, to the ambulance, your question, the ambulance, there's actually two we can choose from. They are currently available whenever the town or the committee makes that recommendation. So we would have that available at any moment, so.
And is it your plan, I mean, if we're gonna start hiring staff to begin August 19th, based on sort of budget projections?
We would have to start with the ambulance well in advance. You're
Yeah.
gonna have to get it, we have almost all,
And that would be then parked over here?
it would have to go over here,
Till
as you
West
can see the
Rockport's
progress
done.
of West Rockport, yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be temporarily staffed or staged over at this location. But again, with what Joe's done, we have almost everything that would need to go on that ambulance already. The staffing, again, we don't know. We could find staffing immediately, it could take some time. That's why it's just rough timeframes in there on when that would start, sometime in August, early August, end of August, it could be September. But to get everybody on board and started, trained with our SOPs, everything that we have, and then roll it out from there.
Okay.
Do you want to go to the timeline? Do you want to walk through that timeline in addition to that? I want
Yeah.
to make sure we cover all of that, because I think I don't want to miss any steps.
Yep.
So Jeff, it's it's the second page of the whole, yeah, there you go, right there. So, again, I sort of talked through some of this. June 2023, the town approved the budget with 2 full-time firefighters. We hired the 2 full firefighters in November 2023, and we began the discussions with the select board about purchase. 2023, the board approves with the voter approval pending at town meeting, the purchase of an ambulance to be delivered January 2025, and a free lease of an ambulance should one be needed. The application for first responder license to Maine EMS was submitted in December. Maine EMS conducted in January 2024, inspected the facilities, and subsequently they issued the license for first responding. February, yeah.
But that's the facility at the existing fire station?
Yep.
Okay.
So 2024, we're here, the EMS workshop with guest speakers. Spring 2024, so there's a lot in this block. It includes costs for a full-time EMS department and municipal budget, continue developing first responder program, working towards the transport license, collaborating with other communities on EMS solutions in FY '25, including both purchasing, staffing, and training, and also negotiate a short-term agreement for EMS coverage.
And so the distinction, we've got a license for first responding, and then we will need a license that allows us to transport people in the, okay.
And that's transport from the emergency location to a hospital?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, not the other kind of transport.
Often the language differentiation is transport to the hospital, transfer between
Oh,
hospitals.
very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll become experts in no time.
Interfacility transfer.
So May 2024, I have an open house, a Q&A and open house, and that's TBD. But the idea is to really help people understand what the service is, what could it be, and this is something that presumably, if it's in your budget, then we want people to understand this topic. Because as we've all learned, it's pretty in-depth, and there's a lot to understand and why you would go from where you are to potentially where you could be. So June 11th is the town meeting. Pending the vote results, we would advertise for full-time positions. In July, we'd establish a hiring committee and begin interviews. And then mid-month, we would have the new hires start for 24/7 coverage while working with that contracted short-term provider, EMS provider. So that's that sort of kind of a two-pronged effort to try to make sure you have, until you've got your wits about you and you've got your feet under you before you can fly, like a bird, right? And then January 2025 being full-time. Now, could that change? Jason says that's something that the most important thing is what we're talking about is really aiming towards FY25 as a start for this. And we need the experience and support of other vendors and providers to make that work. It won't work to simply say Rockport's Rockport Fire and Rescue ready to go July 1. That just doesn't happen. So it's going to take, and that comes at a cost. So, when you look at the overall cost that we're talking about in that budget, there's a substantial cost to hire another provider to work concurrently. And also, as Joe said, you're not getting the revenue from those. You aren't billing those out. You're providing effectively a first responder, services, but you're not able to transport, so you're not billing, you're not getting the revenue, which then means we're operating, just simply paying out those costs. The budget that we prepared suggests that about a third of our costs are offset by revenues. But the longer that we go without transporting, the less that, and the bigger delta opens up between what we have to ask the taxpayers to pay for and what those being billed for our services are paying for. So that's a challenge, and that's obviously something that the sooner you can get going financially, the better off you are. Now, there are some, communities in and around that want to take a longer time to get there. And that's up to them. If Camden wants to take longer, if Hope wants to take longer, Lincolnville, so be it. But what we're presenting here, I think, is with the sort of team we've crafted here, between Dr. McAllister as a medical director and Joe providing the experiences that he's gotten in the decades of service, on top of what Chief Peasley's done. We're putting together a team here that can hopefully answer a lot of those questions and get us as well established to be able to jump off. And that's what working with some of the area chiefs, Chief Richards, Chief Wytalk, Chief Farley, Chief Keller, trying to get to a point where we can get to that place. But when you turn to the next page and you start looking at the budget, there's a reason why, before I go to Hope, and I can tell you, Hope doesn't like to spend money at all. Love those folks up there. I love them dearly. Just like I talked about Newcastle, I love those folks up there. But they don't like spending money up there, let me tell you. We have to have a good plan. We have to have a plan that we can go to them and say, this is what it costs to provide those services. So making sure that the 5 of you are on a plan where I can start talking with others, that's important. I assume you don't want me to walk through the letter, do you, Denise?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
everybody's had a chance to review all that.
Yeah.
And I think the highlights
the highlight.
are, yeah.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, the $276 would mean, that's the average homeowner in Rockport, that would be their increase in taxes, $276. We're talking about roughly around $1.2 million with an offset of revenue, as John indicated, of about a third of that, all depending on timing and overlap and all of that, but that roughly is what we're looking at. We've, got some potential from the Weidman Fund as part of that revenue to help offset for our taxpayers. So. And I appreciate Megan's good thorough work on
And,
explaining
and
that.
it's, though it's a $1.2 million budget, as I said, 1/3 being offset with revenues. So you're talking about a net impact of $789,000 to the budget, which is a significant impact on the budget. This was luckily one of the first budgets that we talked about. So every other department I've been talking, this is a big weight on the whole situation.
But I do want to highlight that, as John has indicated, in this budget, we've moved 2 positions
Yep.
from the fire department into this department.
That's right.
So it's,
That's very important to know.
it's a number that even further reduces the
That's right.
789,000, really. It's not 789,000
No.
in new money,
No,
new
it's
spending.
closer to 500 than 800 because of those 2 positions and their salaries and benefits being moved from fire to EMS.
And are we talking just the first year budget for this? Because
Yeah,
once we're up and running, then
Right.
we wouldn't have the expenditure for
Ri-
another.
that's right.
So that'll be an
So-
offset of whatever the dollar amount would be, I don't know.
Absolutely, and that's one thing, so we'd lose that additional cost of having the additional provider somewhat riding along with us, I guess, of sorts. And then secondarily, but there would be an addition, because right now we are not budgeting in what's proposed here, those positions starting until August 19. So there's a savings of 8 weeks or so that we're not budgeting for,
That year.
because it's gonna
So
take us time
following
to
year
hire.
we'd have-
It's kind of like last year, we did with those 2 positions, Eric's suggestion of sort of staggering the hiring of them, trying to do something similar here. And there's other things that we could do in that sort of realm of trying to get it a little bit tighter, a little bit closer. The other thing that's not in here is any other revenues from, other communities. So if we are working, in a world where Camden is ready to provide these services as we are, we could go to our neighbors and say, well, look, let's work together on a shared arrangement and how we view our relationships with Hope and Lincolnville, who are currently part of our agreement with Northeast and are gonna be looking for coverage if for some reason Camden and Rockport are not part of the mix. So we can have a conversation with them, but in large part, that's still an unknown. So it's hard to say, what that number would be.
And I think it's fair to say this is a fairly conservative budget. We haven't gone overboard in terms of estimating revenues that we
Right.
could receive.
Trying to, yeah.
Yeah, and what would be helpful for you all if do we want to look at the budget itself?
I don't know if my brain would really function.
That helmet was on too tight this weekend for you, right?
Boy, was it.
Hit his head.
Should've seen the first one that I tried.
Yeah, I thought it was, there's a lot of numbers in here and a lot of thought that went into this.
Yeah, but it's pretty easy to figure out.
Yeah,
There's no
Yeah.
surprises in it.
yep. So I'm not sure if that's.
And a lot of these numbers,
Surprises might be, as I say, too conservative.
Yeah.
a lot of the numbers, again, Joe as well as myself have reached out to different agencies where they're at, what they're using. So we've gotten numbers from a lot and kind of put it all together based on rough number of calls, volume, so first year budget.
I had one question, but it might just be in how it's written out. So I'm on the next page. Yeah.
What page you on?
Down at so this is the real budget page. Public Safety EMS Department 0405.
Capital items,
Yeah, so down
Yes.
at the bottom there,
the 46,000.
yeah, I couldn't, we have 62,000 and 46,000, but then we have a total of 62.
Oh, it
Does it have
didn't,
something to do with reserves? or-
no, that's, Megan didn't, it's the calculation didn't
So it
happen.
didn't happen, so it's a
Yep.
one,
And I am not
108.
an Excel expert, so.
Yep, no, it should
So
have been.
this-
Police purchase?
yeah. So we have
It-
a line item of 62 and a line item of 46, but then we have a
Oh.
total of 62,
Yeah.
but
Gotcha.
that should be 108. Does that mean that we go up 46 on our
Yeah.
total?
Yeah, that goes up 46, yeah.
Expensive.
Okay, so we're more over 2 million now.
Mhm.
Okay.
I noticed that, and I wasn't sure if it had something to do
1.2,
with the factors of
not 2
reserve.
million.
Yeah, 1.2.
You said 2 million.
You're right, you're right. I know. Bad, bad.
One thing that we were talking about, the conservative note too, in particular, is the restitution. So and I wanna jump to the revenue, cause it's, makes you feel a whole lot better to talk about revenues and expenditures. So the policy that the board approved in December and then amended last month regarding costs for non-taxpayers. I mean, we are the car crash capital of Knox County, right?
As I remember, 75% of our calls are non-residents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, the number, there's two numbers, just, we put a 25,000 number here. We put a $9,000, I think, in the fire department. But Jason has already billed out $7,000,
73 now.
okay. And that's
That was
in-
just for January for 4 calls, 4 car accidents.
Right, so,
For non-residents.
7,300.
7,000, I think it was like 200 or 300. Those were 4 accidents. The primary person at fault was a non-resident, per the police report. Have been submitted to the billing agency that we're using now, so.
Great.
so what my point is that we may be low on this restitution number. And, you know, again, that's part of this conservative numbers of trying to at least show it all and be transparent about that, but you know, that was something we sort of plugged in when we met on this a few weeks ago, but I feel like that's one number that perhaps offsets some things.
But we got 2 more months to figure out the average of 3 months.
Yeah, right, yeah, and this is the
And then
slow
we
time.
can, and then we
Yeah.
can figure out what we think should really be there.
Yep, exactly,
Because, yeah, you've got summer.
Yeah, right.
boy.
right.
Yeah, if we're taking
Multiply.
the 3 slowest months and figuring out, and then averaging it out and raising it a little bit. We could
Square
get up
it.
to around 70,000 at this rate.
So the restitution is a new revenue income stream? so
Yes.
to
It is.
speak?
Exactly.
It was
That
approved,
policy we
Yeah.
approved,
Yeah.
an initial restitution policy was approved 6 years ago, but it was a very minimal one. It was due to that Burger King tractor trailer rollover. We have since redone it with actual amounts based on what this company and other companies, there's other towns in this county that are using it as well. Another community received $9,000 in a very short amount of time in their revenue. So again, based on the amount of car accidents that we have, the seriousness of some of these car accidents, it allows us to go after the insurance company, not the person.
Right.
We are not going after the people, it's the
No.
insurance company.
Right.
So I want to make that very clear.
And
It's
so
a
that,
cost recapture.
in effect, that's kind of a new
New revenue.
offset
For us, it is, it's
for
brand
us.
new.
For us.
We just, again, January
Yeah.
1st was
Yeah.
when we just started, and
It's been-
we've had 2 serious accidents and 2 other pretty decent accidents, 2 of which involved extrication, which increases it. And
So the EMS provider gets the transport and the fire department gets the,
Hopefully,
hopefully.
for all of us.
Right.
And they're not guaranteed either, so.
Well, true. No, I
They're
know.
not guaranteed, but we shouldn't leave it out there not trying.
Again,
Absolutely,
Right.
you're doing the
years
right thing.
past, we had to do it, and we don't have the resources to do it. This company is
What they
known
do.
for that's what they do. And we have a little bit of an advantage where most of the agencies they deal with don't work directly with the police department, where we do, so they're sending us the police reports instantly, so she doesn't have to spend the time. So we're sending her not only our reports, but the police report as well, plus photos, which increases the recovery percentage as well, having photo
Right.
proof. So, again, we've submitted 4, so we'll see how it continues.
That's a positive.
Yeah.
I think we have to be somewhat creative in what this new service and where we can work. And again, medical billing is new to us, you know. We're gonna be trying to use investment funds and seeking some remedies in court, in the probate court, to allow us some flexibility there. You know, there's some questions, you know, that sort of go into this, but the big number is the personnel. But I think, and the other part we haven't talked about is that there are a number of people in our town who have gone to Jason, personally, and said, how can I help financially? What can I do to help this service get off the ground? You know, that's a tremendous thing. So, you know, what do we need to do to involve those folks and create, you know, a fund or a reserve fund or endowment or whatever it might be to say, yeah, we want to make sure that we can provide these services and not have to go to the taxpayers. I mean, a lot of what we're doing is personnel, and there's no way around that. But the ability, you know, though that 46,000 didn't get carried in, when you look on the next page, you know, and actually that amount doesn't, you know, but you look at that amount, we're using 108,000 from a gift from Marion Weidman from the late 1960s, and that's going to help us. That could help us, you know, make that first payment on that ambulance, pay for it's the heart monitor, right? It's the 46, yeah. So the Zoll heart monitor. I mean, these are the things that is 50 plus years ago, but that just talks about the generosity of our town. You know, we are a little different that way, in a good way.
Definitely been people that have asked. Like John
Yeah, and
said,
how do we take advantage of that?
we're kind of waiting to get the approval of the board to go towards the budget. We don't want to ask for something that you guys haven't approved yet. So once we get that approval to go on the budget, these people, I think, will start coming forth and talk amongst one another. And they've already said they'll start talking. And I said, let's wait until we get a direction that the board is going to say, yes, let's put it on the, and then at that point, we'll go from there.
I guess I was thinking of something along the lines, and I don't know if there's a reason we can't include personnel, but like the library committee, where they provide, through their endowment, they have the money to fund all the expenses associated with the library, with the exception of personnel.
Yep. That's a great idea.
And I don't know if we could include personnel, because that's obviously the lion's share of the costs here, but,
Yeah.
well, we'll talk more, I guess, about the details of that.
Sure.
I wondered about, the Ellsworth Fire Chief also mentioned some FEMA grants that they're looking into for this service.
FEMA has a grant where if you're increasing staffing, and they'll provide a portion or up to, I think it's up to 100% of your staffing for a 3-year period. I haven't had a lot of experience of it, but it was when we talked about the idea of the 3-town. The idea was that it would be a very competitive arrangement if we were all working together. You know, obviously we're talking about hiring 12. That was like hiring 12 people, and Camden hiring 16, and that's another stratosphere right now. But you know, that was something we looked at, and I know Chief White talked to us quite a bit about that. So I don't know if you worked on it.
It's called the Safer Grant, and as he said, it's funded up to 100% for the first 3 years. But what it requires from the town at that point is a commitment to continue that. Because unfortunately that had been used in the past for, communities had utilized it for the first 3 years, and then when the grant funding ran out, people
It
got
went out of
fired.
business.
So there is a significant expectation of a commitment that the town would continue with that if that were pursued.
And I think that would be our intent, you know, unless there was something where it
We'd
wasn't
have to be
going well.
established and moving with the approval of the voters, then we can apply for
Yeah, I
it
think it would be difficult to do it.
without
It's
having
not
it
usually
approved.
initial
Okay.
staffing, it's
Just good to
expanded
know that there could be some
Yes.
potential further
That was
financial
the
assistance.
direction I was told, that you have to be established and going, Because again, we could apply for the grant, potentially get it, and the voters say no, and now
Yeah.
we've got that grant, so.
Right. Yeah, and then FEMA's
Correct, so.
allocated money to something that's not gonna happen. Yeah, well, that's good to know,
But I
though,
mean,
that there could be some
again,
potential
I'm
future
always
help.
writing grants, we're always researching grants, Joe's looked into some. We just got the $20,000 for, the Lucas machine, so we have the
Mm-hmm.
Lucas machine coming. So we're putting in for everything possible out there, so.
Yeah.
We're doing as much as we can,
Great,
from the grant standpoint.
yep, great. All right, what else do you guys, any other? I mean, I think it's a really well-thought-out, thorough analysis, and appreciate all the time everyone put into putting this packet together and being here tonight. It's a big decision. I don't know if it's a tough decision, because it doesn't seem like we have a lot of options.
And I frankly don't have a lot of questions, just because of my background. For those listening, I was a member of Canada First Aid from 1991 on, so I know a lot of the background on how it works, and I know a lot of how things are working now. So, you know, a lot of it I know, and I probably don't ask the questions because I already know the answers, so I don't have a question for it. So,
And we
I'm probably
rely
not-
on your background and
I'm probably not that
expertise
helpful
here.
that way, but I think you're right. I personally don't think it's a tough decision. I think it's a necessary decision, just to maintain level of care and security for our townspeople. I mean, they deserve it. They really deserve it, and we just can't have the question of what if.
And we'll talk more at our meeting next week.
That's exactly what I was gonna ask, okay, yeah, so.
Yeah, so we
our
don't,
next
tonight,
select
we're
board
just input,
meeting,
getting
we'll be talking
information.
more and potentially voting?
Yep.
Okay.
And whatever additional information we get, I know you guys will circulate to us, and,
I'll reach out to Chief Murphy as well,
Okay.
to see if he'll write something about what they've gone through up there.
that would be helpful, yeah. And again, to the public and anybody else, you know, if you have comments, anything you want to submit to us,
Reach
please
out.
do so.
Please.
Please,
Yeah.
please, please.
Yeah, this is a community effort, we
Was Joe gonna say something?
want to hear from everyone.
You were, I interrupted you.
Gone now. Like being at home.
Gone.
Yeah. Some kid did something and I lost.
I don't know.
Anybody else, Jim, Eric, and, okay,
I'm very happy, thank you.
okay. Well, do we have a motion to adjourn? Do we need a motion to adjourn the workshop?
It's worth
No,
it.
it's a
Yeah.
workshop.
You can do it, I
It's
mean,
hereby
just
declared
because-
So
adjourned.
moved.
Yeah,
Let's adjourn.
let's
Yeah.
adjourn.
Jeff,
Thank you very much.
tell me when you're
Appreciate
clear.
you coming.